Father, I thank you so much for this man, Lord, who's taken on beyond the challenge, Lord, and really has a heart, Lord, for the lost, Lord, and is willing to go to the depths that most of us would never really even understand, Lord. And I just ask, Lord, that you would just minister to him, especially even right now, Lord, and just allow a conduit, Lord Jesus, to go from your heart to his heart and out of his mouth. And I just thank you so much right now. In the most powerful name of all, Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen. Brother, you have free reign, and I'll look at that clock and just ignore it.
I know all of you don't feel that way, so I'll be cognizant of that. I was debating on what I was going to talk about this morning, and as I was reading, even till this morning, I have a general idea of where I'm headed, but I'm always looking for some sort of inspiration. And a gentleman named Jerry Panis, he's a philanthropist, and he passed away this past year. A guy who trains people how to do philanthropy type of work. But one of these quotes that really impacted me here, it says, "If you never walk except where there are tracks, you'll never make new discoveries." Let me read it again. It says, "If you never walk except where there are tracks, you will never make new discoveries." When I think of that, I think of that personally. I think of that from a faith walk. But I also think of it, it could be organizational. Anything that you can think about, it applies to in this year, in this age, where everything is changing at such a rapid pace. And the work that we do, having gone from not working with certain types of programs and things to being able to walk into the behavioral health care space as a ministry organization, the one thing that I've found is that there's lots of new discoveries. And if you're not walking where those places are, where there's no tracks, you're going to get run over. And I think of that personally in my life because as a ministry leader, I'm always in a position where I have to be changing in order to be more effective to serve more people. But I can remember not too long ago, and I know my wife and I were sharing, I don't know, a year or so ago about our personal story of our lives. But I wasn't really able to go into some of the details that I would normally talk about with my own story. But you all that were here, how many of you were here when we talked last time? Okay, good, so not a whole lot of people. I'm right from East Stroudsburg, so I'm not very far from here at all. I grew up in a non-believing home, and I think that's probably one of the most important things to know. Church was not part of my life in any way, shape, or form. I just grew up playing sports. My parents got separated when I was young. I stuck with my mom, and my mom just about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago now, told me that she never disciplined me as a kid because she felt bad because I didn't have a dad. So I grew up as a pretty decent athlete. I could throw things really well, and ended up in a position where, and I always laugh at myself, I say I was a quarterback. I could throw well, but as you could probably guess, I'm not that mobile of a quarterback or runner. You're not supposed to laugh at me. But going through that process, I became a very self-centered person. And I eventually, long story, my wife is part of the story, and I've already told this part of the story with her, but went off to junior college, started to get into a little bit of trouble, and then I actually went back to ESU. And I finally got on the field, and I was, I don't know, 20, 21 years old, something like that. And the 10th play or so of the game, driving down the field, I got shirt tackled awkwardly and landed on my throwing arm and ripped my collarbone off of my throwing arm. So when you think of a couple of the factors building up against me here, no faith orientation to sort of lean on. My dad, I didn't really have a dad at this point, and I've just experienced what I thought would be the most traumatic event of my life. And then I was given a bottle of pills. I misused those pills very badly and became a full-blown heroin addict probably by the age of 24 years old or so, 23, 24, somewhere right there. In and out of jail. whole nine. As soon as I started talking about it, everybody really started looking at me. It's interesting. Everything went shoo. But to think of this, unfortunately, this is not that uncommon of a story anymore. When you look at the news, you read the newspapers, and you start to hear about this opioid epidemic, unless you're just ignoring what's going on in the world right now, you all are aware of what's going on. But I was actually in it. And I, in and out of jail, had a lot of opportunities to leave and to try to change my life, and I just could not do it. I did not have the ability in me to change myself inside out. But then one day, I heard of a place called Teen Challenge. And I ended up there November 8th, 2006. And I was a total mess. I couldn't get out of my way. And I came to the place where hope was lost. And unless you've experienced what I mean by that, when hope is lost, I got to the point in my addiction that I had accepted that is who I was. My identity had changed from somebody who thought that something good could happen to this is my reality. And I'm just going to be a lost addict the rest of my life. And I accepted it. You know how sad of a place it is to get to where you actually accept it. And I finally got into this Teen Challenge program, November 8th, 2006, like I said. And for 2 months, I started to hear this message that I'm going to talk about here for a few minutes. Romans chapter 1, 28 to 32. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents. How interesting that that's in the middle of all this. Foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. When you think of that kind of list, especially me at that point as an unbeliever, it was New Year's Eve, 2007, so we're right before the ball drops, and starting to think through the realities of life. And this is where I was led to. I started asking those questions when I was without hope. Is there a purpose in my life? And somehow, by the grace of God, this is the passage that gave me hope. It's not a very hope-filled passage, is it? But when I started to look at this, the thing I want to point out that I think is extremely important for us to look at is none of these things are categorized as worse than the other. So when you think through the idea of being filled with unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice, well, all of us in this room are guilty of those things. Every one of us. To have malice is to have some form of hatred in your heart, right? To covet something is to want something that's somebody else's. We've all been guilty of those things at some point in our lives. But then I started to see things like having deceit and being a hater of God tied together with those things. I had never thought of it that way before. I never thought of just having covetousness in my heart would be aligned with the same thing as saying being a hater of God. But then being haughty or boastful, who in this room is not guilty of that? For sure I am. But it really got me when it said disobedient to parents. That's almost a catch-all phrase. But the catch-all phrase that really got me was it said these 3 words. Inventors of evil. And I thought to myself, if all the other stuff didn't get me, which it all got me, there's really no way to kind of get around being an inventor of evil right alongside being disobedient to our parents. If those are the things that qualify me as a sinner, then I'm guilty. And that is for the very first time where I finally saw hope, because you know what? I realized that even though that I had a desperate condition with my addiction, that I had lost hope, that I had been in and out of prison. I had done all kinds of crazy stuff for a number of years. That I was no different than you. And at that moment, I finally saw that my sin was not just like this. And I mean this by being on a horizontal level. Meaning the stuff that I had done didn't just impact, if you all were the people that I had negatively impacted in my life, that it just wasn't all about that stuff. But it was that I was actually offensive to a holy God. That's a whole nother level. And for that night, when I finally came to realize this, I had a it wasn't like it was a vision or anything like that, but I just had a really clear memory of a lot of the dumb, knuckleheaded stuff that I had done for my entire life. And it was very clear that I had done all of this stuff, and that I was offensive to God. But then I thought of this other story that I had learned, and I'd only learned the Bible at this point for 2 months, so I didn't know anything. It's funny, when I first learned the Bible, I thought I knew everything, and now it's like, 12 or 13 years later, and I realize I know nothing. But the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector, also a very famous story in the Bible. You have two guys going to make their offer before the Lord, and the Pharisee comes before and basically is saying, God, you should be thankful that you have me. Interesting, isn't it? And this tax collector, those of you who know about tax collectors in this time, the tax collector is the one who's despised in society, the one who has been guilty of crimes and is looked upon very negatively. Well, this tax collector, in that same story, is the one who couldn't even lift up his head. He just sort of looked down and said, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And you know what it says happened after that? There's a couple interesting words there. It says, this man is the one who walked away justified. And when I think of this word justified, I didn't have any idea what it meant back in the 10, 12 years ago. When I think of the word justify, I think of I'm trying to justify something I did wrong or some story I made up, and I'm just looking to justify it by downplaying something. Well, the word justification in the Bible is a completely different ballgame. When it says that this guy walked away justified, what that means is that with his state of humility before the Lord, and having that contrition in his heart and looking down and just saying, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner, that he was actually in a state of repentance. And he walked out of that room a different person with a different standing before that holy God that he knew that he offended. And this all started to make sense to me at this point, because I knew that at my core, and it's true of all humanity, that we are sinners in our nature. But the beautiful thing of this is that it doesn't have to stop there. When you think through the work of Christ and what he has done by living this perfect life and then dying this horrible death for sinners, well, he did both things that we needed. In order for us to be right with God, we've either got to be perfect or we need to have a perfect sacrifice. Well, us being perfect, who in this room says I'm perfect? None of us. But every one of us who has a relationship with the Lord now, we can say that we've been accepted and declared right in the courtroom of heaven because of the Lord Jesus Christ. So it was that day when I finally, those dots, kind of the stars aligning, and I finally figured out that my core issue was sin. But the hope that I found in this passage that's filled with everything but hope, I found that there was forgiveness in that other story of the Pharisee and the tax collector. So no matter what place that we are in as individuals, it can be the most desperate and hopeless of situations. There can be, and there is, hope. And that's the most important thing to know. So on that night, when I figured all this stuff out, I also figured something else out. And I figured it out, that it was actually the Lord who enabled me to even understand what the heck that means. Because I had to be drawn, like all of us have to be drawn to the Lord. But what does he use to draw us? Well, he uses us, the church. He uses his word to draw us. He uses the prayers that you are praying even now for that person that you have in your mind that's lost. And they might not just be lost with addiction, just lost in general. But there's hope. And I can tell you, as a person who was lost and who was in a desperate place, that I found that hope. And maybe a better way to say it is that hope found me. But that hope is available for each and every one of us that are in this room. And places like Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge, that's one of the ways in which the Lord uses the process of restoring hope. Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge, as I shared when I was here last time, we are an adult program, or a faith-based program, to help people that are suffering with addiction. In 2017, and there's a long story that goes into this that I'm not going to share today, but in 2017, we opened the first medical detox program in the history of Teen Challenge. And it happens to be like an hour and a half away from here. What are the chances? So when I think of hope, I think of that person that right now is on the phone at our call center, right now. That probably at some point, if it's not even right now, maybe it's a loved one, and somebody right now has a needle hanging out of their arm, like right now. And that person then is on the phone with our folks, like right now. That at 11 a.m., that person will probably be in our program. And this is a real story that's probably happening right now. And somebody will be in there at 1 o'clock this afternoon. And to think of the concept of going from death to life. There's a resource now that's like right down the road from you. An hour and a half away is not that far. And along with that, we have our short-term, our inpatient clinical program. But both of those two programs, our detox program and our inpatient program, are serving as complementary services to our long-term faith-based discipleship program, which is the place where true change happens. I was speaking with Pastor this morning. He was talking to me about an individual that had tried many different treatment programs, but that treatment in and of itself was not the answer. And I could not agree more. Treatment is a good step in a good direction, but long-lasting hope and recovery is found in the Lord Jesus Christ. So having these programs now, we are able to serve people like we've never served before. But not only that, in the past year, we actually took a wing of our adult male detox program, and we now also have a wing for adult women in our detox program right in Berks County. So now we have detox services for men and women at the same campus, which was another historical breakthrough that was never happened in the history of Teen Challenge. And that's exciting to be able to stand in front of you and share it. But another thing that we have also recently done is that we just were in an acquisition process with a Christian intensive outpatient organization called the Naaman Center to help individuals who have to be doing the types of things that you're doing. Maybe somebody in here has an addiction and they have to go to work tomorrow and they just can't get away for whatever reason. People get DUIs, people have different types of problems that happen. And now, and even though we're not quite local yet, down in Lancaster and Dauphin County, we just acquired this organization and now have 7 more licenses in the state of Pennsylvania, taking us up to 10 locations now in the state of Pennsylvania. When I talk about the idea of expanding our mission, when you look at southeastern Pennsylvania, where we're really more heavily located, and in Berks County, which is up not terribly far from here, there's a whole lot of space going from there to Pittsburgh, where we have another adult male center, and we have an adult women's center in Philadelphia as well. But there's a whole lot of space without dots. And our vision for the future is to fill in the state with a lot of dots in order for us to be able to impact the state of Pennsylvania in the way that it needs to be impacted. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Pennsylvania is about just about the worst state in the entire country when it comes to opioid overdose deaths. I don't know if you know that or not. Certain studies just came out that I've read in the past couple of months that say Pennsylvania is number one. Number one. When I got into doing this work between years 2000 and 2014, the Centers for Disease Control, it was a thing I didn't even know what to do with. that between those 14 years, over 500,000 people died of overdose deaths. 500,000 people in 14 years. But when you look forward, and you probably see the statistics now, and they're getting into the 70-something thousand last year, think of how quick now you can get to 500,000 overdose deaths. In Pennsylvania in 2015, there were over 3,500. 2016, there were over 4,600. 2017, over 5,000 people in Pennsylvania dying from overdose deaths. And what can we do is the question that we asked. What can we do to be able to make a greater impact? Not only just to serve for no reason, but we had 3 specific goals. And the first one is the preservation of human life. We as the church cannot evangelize people if they're a corpse. So having life-saving opportunities now with our detox programs, we are able to help in that process of preserving life. And secondly, we found out that we needed more services in order to impact more people. And that's where we got into offering different programs for different folks. But third, and most importantly, is that we needed to facilitate opportunities for people to meet the Lord Jesus Christ. And that is the thing that we're in the business of doing, is sharing the hope that is found in the Lord, understanding that people that are coming to us are in the same condition as I explained to you that I was in. I talk to countless people that have lost hope. When I share this story in a room when I'm doing an incoming breakfast with the guys coming to the program, there could be a room this big, and I'd say, how many of you understand what I'm talking about when it's losing that sense of hope? And 3/4 of the room will raise their hands, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. And having just accepted their station in life as I'm just going to be addicted to drugs for the rest of my life. And then through the process of understanding the sin condition and the opportunities that people have to get to know the Lord, you can literally see stories going from death to life. I brought along a friend this morning, my friend Eric over here, who is one of these guys who went through this program a number of years ago and has been working with us as an employee for a number of years, and he runs all of our food service department, which is a big deal. It's serving like 750, 800 meals a day. We're talking a pretty serious food service operation. But Eric experienced this life change that I'm talking about, and I want him to come and share his story with you as well, so you can just see that lives are being changed and that hope can be found.
Morning, guys. My name is Eric Wasilewski. Like Kris said, I graduated from Teen Challenge in December of 2013. If you guys hear me talking and like going kind of fast, just roll over your hands and I'll try to slow down. I only got a couple minutes. I'm going to try to hit a couple things. I grew up in Easton, Pennsylvania, not far from here in the Lehigh Valley. I had a great upbringing. Both of my parents were together. They raised me right. I didn't want anything as a kid. My parents provided everything I needed. But at a very young age, I recognized that I was a little bit taking everything to the extreme. I was the kid jumping off the roof into your pool and trying to do double backflips off your trampoline. And so when I started to experiment with drugs and alcohol, obviously I took that to the extreme right away. 16 years old, I was drinking every single chance I got. And I recognized that I was going to be an alcoholic if I continued to drink. There's a lot of alcoholism in my family, so I knew that this was going to be a problem. Very similar to Kris, I could throw things well. Obviously, I'm much smaller than Kris. My hands are smaller than his, so I picked up baseball. My whole life was dedicated to baseball. I'm a lefty. I can pitch very well. It's one of the natural giftings that God gives me. That and the kitchen are the two things that I would naturally gift with. Everything else I really need to apply myself to. I'm not a naturally gifted individual. But about 17 years old, right after I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol, I decided that I was going to no longer play baseball. Now, all of my eggs were in my baseball basket. Going to college was hinged on baseball. My life, when I was a little kid, I would tell you that I was going to play professional baseball, and I honestly believed that. So I decided that drugs and alcohol at 17 were more important to me than actually anything that I had planned for my future, and I gave up baseball. My varsity year, I didn't play baseball, and this is where my family starts to go, whoa, 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 what's going on with you? What are you going to do with your life? Like, that was everything to you. So they started to notice it. Fast forward, I get myself together for a couple of years, and I go snowboarding to Blue Mountain. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Blue Mountain. I had snowboarded and skied my whole life. And so my first time down the trail, I come up short on a double jump. So there's a jump, and then there's a big gap, and then there's a landing. And I come up short on that, and I slingshot in, and I break my humerus out of my skin, and I break my wrist in 3 places. At this point in my life, I had never put an opioid into my body at all. I had never done it. I was the kid in high school that when he got his wisdom teeth taken out, he sold his painkillers to his buddies. I was that type of inventor of evil my whole life. So now I leave the hospital after 10 days. They put my arm back together. They put my wrist back together. I leave the hospital after 10 days with 300 narcotic painkillers. Okay? With being home, being the executive chef of a restaurant at the time, I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Now for 3 months I did nothing but lay on an air mattress and eat painkillers until about 10 days after that I started saying, wow, these painkillers are starting to really get me kind of feeling right. And I started snorting my painkillers. And so obviously we know the progression of that. Long story short, I started doing heroin about a year and a half after getting the painkillers. I tried different rehabs, I tried different programs, I tried psych wards, I tried everything you can imagine. And one day a pastor that I knew from the town that I was running a restaurant and came to me and he said, Eric, I think you need to go to Teen Challenge. And I said, Randy, I'm stinking 30 years old, bro. What am I going to do at Teen Challenge? And he said, it's for adults now. It's just a misnomer. They still call it Teen Challenge. So I ended up going to Teen Challenge, kicking and screaming. But I went. And my goal, once I got to Pittsburgh Induction Center, was to stay there for long enough that I could get my heroin tolerance back down to a manageable level. That was literally my goal. I had no intentions on stopping using drugs. I had no intentions on following the Lord. I didn't have any of those plans. Before that, I was homeless down by the river. I mean, when Kris talks about losing hope, my only fear in life up to this point was dying. And I came to a point in my heroin addiction where I was completely okay with dying a heroin addict. I just got to the point where I said, it's going to come soon. It was on the horizon. And I was okay with it. I was just like, you know what? This is who you are. You are Eric Wasilewski, the junkie who's going to die a junkie. And I was okay with that. That was the lowest point of my entire life. And so now I go to Teen Challenge, and God softened my heart when I was there. I wasn't seeking after him. He was seeking after me. Even when I was that junkie down by the river, he said, I want that junkie in my family. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. Unconditional love was something I never experienced until I understood that. And so I go through the program, and I do well in the program. I'm not very good at following rules, but for some reason, Jesus changed my heart, and I started following the rules and doing what I needed to do, and he showed me that there was a better way. And so I graduated, and I worked for Kris, and Kris, he mentored me, and he discipled me organically, and it was a beautiful relationship we had, and my life was amazing. I had lived in a house, and everything I owned was in the bedroom of a house, and I was the happiest I had ever been in my adult life. And so I have this void in here, and it's a void that I've tried to fill with drugs, I tried to fill with women, I tried to fill with alcohol, I tried to fill with money, I tried to fill with careers, I tried to fill it with everything. It's a more void that I have. I need more of anything I can get. And so when God softened my heart and changed my heart, He gave me the spirit that dwelled in there that now filled that more void. So I wasn't constantly chasing after the next best thing. And so I worked with Kris, and Kris was raising me up to be a leader at Teen Challenge. And I lost sight of everything that Kris had done, Teen Challenge had done, and what especially God had done for me. And I wanted worldly things again. I wanted a car, and I wanted a girlfriend, and I wasn't ready for any of those things, but Eric Wasilewski wanted worldly things again. So I packed my stuff abruptly, and I left Teen Challenge unrecommendedly, and I went out and I got a job in the construction field, and I hated it. And I got a car very soon after. I got a 3-bedroom apartment, and I got a girlfriend, and I got all the things that I thought was going to once again fill this more void, and I was the most miserable I had ever been. At this time, I was using no drugs. I just worked. I hated my job. I hated my life again. And I got to a point where I went back to using drugs. Like the disciples in John chapter 21, Jesus resurrects from the dead, and he tells them that they're going to go out and be fishers of men. And they went back to what they knew best when Jesus left them, and that was fishing. For me, after 4 years of sobriety from heroin, I went back to what I knew best, and that was sticking drugs and alcohol back into my body. And so I quickly caught myself, or the state trooper quickly caught me and pulled me up. So at 35, I got a first drug charge ever, and it's what I needed. I needed to go out and see that the grass wasn't greener on the other side. I needed to see that I wasn't missing out on anything by being at Teen Challenge. I had to humble myself extremely. I'm extremely prideful still. I'm working on it. But I had to reach out to Kris, and I had to reach out to the director, and that was a struggle for me. But God used that with me. And so on my hands and knees in my sister's basement, ready to commit suicide, I got down on my face. I was literally sleeping on an air mattress in my sister's basement, who's 10 years younger than me, by the way. And I'm sobbing, and I said, God, I don't know what you want me to do. I really don't. And I'm back to that hopeless state again, and I'm going to die very shortly. And God doesn't audibly speak to me, but almost as clear as he did audibly speak to me, I heard him say, I never wanted you to lead Teen Challenge, my son. And once I heard that in my head, it was like the entire world came back off of my shoulders. I got back into Teen Challenge. Kris understands the gospel enough that he knows that people need restoration, and he allowed me to come back and be restored, and I'm extremely grateful for it. I'm a staff member there. I did 3 months of restoration. I've been back. March 16th, I'll have 2 years clean again, and I've been a staff for about a year. I said a lot. In September, I got married to the girl of my dreams, and I'm extremely blessed. I no longer walk in what Eric Wasilewski wants, and I let the Spirit lead me, and he leads me into what I need. I listen to my wife a lot. She's very intelligent. She helps me. But Eric Wasilewski's ways gets him into nothing but destruction, and so. Thank you for letting me share.
I asked the worship team beforehand if they would come up. I don't know if the whole gang is available, but we've got you, so you're the only one up there. Go ahead. Yeah. But I want us just to be able to play a song. There we go. She can come back up. I want to play that Freedom Reigns song again. And I want to have just a time of prayer, because this is a very, very serious issue for our culture right now. This is one of the main things that's going on in our country right now as we speak. And many, many people are dying from overdose deaths. And many people have lost hope. And maybe there's even family members, or everybody in here probably, if you don't know somebody, you know somebody who knows somebody who's caught up in addiction. I would say every single person that's in this room that would apply to right now. And you know what? That's pretty much the case with every county in the state of Pennsylvania, and then every state in the United States of America. That's how dire of a situation this is. So I just would like for us just to take a few minutes play this song. I'll be up here, my wife will be up here, I'm volunteering Eric to come up here. That if anybody wants us to pray, we're going to be up here, we're going to be worshiping. We want to spend a little bit of time with you folks. Then when the song is over, I'll pray and close the service out. So it's been great to spend some time with you. Thank you for hearing the work that's going on in our ministry and in our lives. We love you, we appreciate you, and we're here for you.